I don't want to take too much of my father's time. Why don't you come on up here? Many of you know him, president of William Jessup University. Sounds like Bible College, sounds like Christian College, then William Jessup University, some 26 years. I wanted to visually illustrate, though, that for the younger people in this audience this morning, we need to continue to be a support to the older generation. My father and I, we argued a little bit this morning about who would wear the belt because he forgot his. And I said, Pop, I really need it because I'll lose my pants. And he said, but I will too. So I decided I would give him to him after I got up here. There you go, brother. Good luck.
Thank you, Jim, for the belt. I really appreciate that. And I used to be organized, but then we hired Don Hinkle. Don taught me that organization is of the flesh, that you have to be spontaneous and let the Spirit lead. And so he taught me to do that. So, oh, thank you, Jim. It fits, too. Man, that's fantastic. That's great. Okay, I feel like a new man now, ready to go. Jim used to sit back over in this section. We used to have over here the PA and stuff, and I'll never forget when he was growing up, the kind of attention that he paid to the services was this. He was sitting near the back, and the pews at that time had the communion cups in a little round rubber holder that sat inside the wood, and you could pop those out. So the youth group would sit back there, and Jim was the leader of it at this time, and they would roll those during the worship service down this section here, and people would watch it come by and wonder, what in the world is that? And they would all get down at the end of the service and see who won. You know, so that was his attentiveness during my preaching, and it hasn't much improved much since then either. Anyway. Speaking of Don Hinkle, what a blessing to hear that guy preach. Man, I tell you. He tried to mentor me, but he finally gave up on that. But I'll never forget, I was speaking about the fact that, he kind of waits the last minute on things because he's a creative, bright guy. And I remember one Sunday evening, we got here to the services, and I said, well, Hinkle, you all ready to preach? And he says, is it my turn to preach? I said, yeah, it sure is. Been on the calendar, man, for 4 months. And so, okay. So he sat in front, and I saw David, what's his last name? Plays the bells, handbells. Are you here, David? Reuter. Dave Reuter. Where are you, David? Oh, he left already. Way to go, David. Okay. Anyway, David had his handbell set there that night, Sunday evening. So Don sat there, and he kind of took notes during the handbell thing, and he got up, and he used some verse that I haven't found since, but it said something about the message ringing forth clearly. And he used every one of those bells as an illustration of how the diversity that God has built into us still has opportunity to present a powerful message. And I've got to tell you, for a spontaneous 10-minute preparation, it was one of the best messages Hinkle has ever preached. It was better than Huppum Muppum Menard. It really was. But the time I remember most about Don was he was to preach on a Sunday morning. And we found out that CNN was going to show up because there was an issue in one of our families about an adoption, and it had hit the press because of some policy issues, and they wanted to have it go national. And the people who were engaged in this were singing in our choir. So can we come and do your worship service for you? Can we video it? And I said, why, certainly. Don says to me, Bryce, it's my turn to preach, but you're the senior pastor here. You need to go ahead and do that. I said, no, Don, you're all set, man. You go do it. It's your turn. And so I got up ahead of time, the cameras were rolling and the bright lights and everything, and I did all the meditations and the prayers and the announcements and interacted with the people. People had a great time, and Don had spent hours on that sermon. I mean, that was unusual, and he just put a lot of time into it. And as soon as he got up after the choir sang, Don was ready to preach. The lights went out, the cameras were folded up, and they left the auditorium. It was like taking a pin into Don and letting all the air go out. And he did better with the handbells. I got there's so many memories that flood over me when I stand here in front of you people. This church has meant so much to us, but can't talk about all of them. We don't have time, and there's so many people that have impacted my life. And I just owe so much to this congregation. I got a letter from Jim and Lynn Adams that I thought was rather interesting. Thought you might like to hear it. He said he was one of our youth ministers along with Jim Yost and Woody Phillips back in the middle 70s. He said, I remember the Sunday morning that Woody Jr. decided that during his sermon we would act out a parable. He pretended to insult me, and I pretended to get angry and offended. I threw my Bible down, stomped down the aisle, slammed the door on the way out. Bryce advised us not to repeat this performance in the second service. No matter how hard he tried to explain it, that it was just an act, some people refused to believe him. I think Woody and I later became an illustration of what not to do in Dallas, Missouri's preaching class. Dallas, Missouri used to sit right down here. We had a lot of teachers that were part of our work here through the years. And I'll never forget Dallas. He had a few opinions about things occasionally. And when I'd be preaching, it was a theologian, and I'm kind of loosey-goosey with my theology, just love the Lord and be given to Christ and get on with it, But I would get into something deeply theological, and I could see him. He had about 3 levels of disagreement, okay? First one was he'd start to go like this. And second one was he'd lean forward with his elbow like this. And the third level of disagreement was, right when I was preaching. So that was always God called to me, preach it, man, preach it, keep hitting it, keep going after it. But he kind of built a little cage around me so I didn't have to look at him during the services, and I could be freer that way. But so many interesting memories. I remember Bryce's new baby blue suit, baby blue, not a baby suit, but that color, that he got for his birthday. And he was so proud to wear it on Sunday morning, and every time he made a gesture with his arms, he flashed bright yellow price tags in each armpit. Forgot to take them out. That was my wife's job, but she didn't get it done. At the end of the first year on staff, both Woody and I resigned our positions to pursue missions in Santiago, Chile. Amazingly, and I'm mostly over this, the church replaced both Woody and I with only one person, the infamous Don Hinkle. But Central didn't just accept our resignation and move on. They enthusiastically sent us out with financial, emotional, and practical partnerships. Looking back, I am so thankful for this. World Missions has been in our hearts ever since. You planted a seed back then that is producing fruit in our current ministry. What a neat letter, and I could read more of it for you there. But God has just done so much through the legacy that was handed to us, and what a privilege it was for me to have a small part in it, to share in it, to deepen my own life because of your ministering to us and to our family. I remember preaching from this pulpit a number of sermons, and I remember one time I was telling the illustration about how that in marriage, good communication, you can just have a glance at each other and you know a whole volume of information of what was communicated in that glance. I told the story of how I was on the roof of my home, and the stucco was in need of being painted. And so I was up on the roof, and my wife was down below watching me and telling me where to paint because I couldn't see it as I would paint the stucco. The only problem was I kept using the word asphalt, and I didn't realize it. As I said, I was painting the asphalt. So I kept telling the story, and people were laughing and so forth, and when I got done, they just thought it was hilarious. And my wife finally piped up and said, especially since you were painting the asphalt instead of the stucco. And of course, it brought the house down. And before that time and since that time, she has been one of the finest sharers in my sermons. She not only helps me prepare them, but she even does better helping me preach them as I attempt to get them out. But just so many, many good memories of our times together. And thanks, Jim, my pants are staying up. I really appreciate that. Central has an extraordinary DNA. Don used that phrase this morning. And a DNA, by definition, when it's used as a metaphor, is established during its initial stages, reflecting the personal and professional values of its founders. It defines the vision, values, and sense of purpose that build an organization together. Well, having been at Adventure Christian Church since its birth in Adventure. Central Christian Church, since its birth in 1939. Let me give you one aging man's definition who cannot always remember things right, of Central's DNA. Dedication. Since the very beginning, there's been a dedication in the hearts of the people who belong to this congregation to the Lord Jesus Christ and to Him alone. He has been placed at the center and the circumference of all that we are and all that we want to become, and Dad got that started. That was the passion of his life, that would not only be the philosophy or the commitment of our heart, but it would be the expression of our life, his character, that we would seek him with all that we are. It's a commitment, a dedication to his word. It's been our guiding book, our authority. We do not compromise it. We do not revise it. We stand upon it because it's the truth once for all delivered unto the saints. And truth does not limit life. It sets us free. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And any modification we do to that truth that's been revealed and given to us is to our own hurt and to our own loss rather than to our gain and to our fullness. We're dedicated here to his family, the church, to help one another and to serve a hurting humanity. I learned that at a very early age through some of my Sunday school teachers that I had when I was just a small boy, and I publicly apologize to any of you who may be here today for all the pranks that I pulled, but I learned them from my brother. But I remember one time I ran through a heap of ashes. My brother was smart enough not to do that. We'd gotten some ice cream over there at Hillcrest Creamery at 17th and Santa Clara Street. And I ran through this pile of ashes, and it was burning hot underneath. I ended up with huge blisters. I was only maybe 6 or 7 years of age. I remember I would not let my mother touch my feet. Who did? I said, call up my Sunday school teacher. Now, I don't know how my mom felt about that. I love Mom and all that, but there was something special in my heart that I saw in my Sunday school teacher at Central Christian Church. She just served the Lord and served kids and was dedicated to that service. Well, it's not only dedication to Christ and his word and to God's family, but to his world and to evangelism, to touching all those who are not yet a part of the kingdom, because the church really is not for those who are a part of it, but for those who do not yet belong to it. That we would reach out and make a difference in a hurting world to change the very landscape of eternity. I remember as a small boy, the resources were very, very thin. In fact, I remember that there was a student there at San Jose Bible College the first couple of years who worked at Clapp's Baby Food. And he would bring dented cans. And the professors would take the dented cans out and some of the workers and so forth. And then all that was left usually was fig pudding. And so my dad, being generous, would simply bring the fig pudding home to us. And so many evenings we ate fig pudding. And I remember saying to my dad, Dad, this stuff is horrible. And Dad would say, think of all the poor starving children in China. And I would say, Dad, box it all up and send it all to China, you know. But as I look back, we were poor in the things that money can buy. But we were rich in the things that money can't buy. Love and joy and peace and purpose and power and future and all those other qualities that come when a family is given to the Lord. Central Christian Church was concerned about family, concerned about the church family, very willing to serve. And that was modeled for me as a small child growing up. Evangelism became an outreach immediately of the church, as was described in the video, how that 4 came to Christ in the first month of January when the church was just given birth to. I will never forget one time there was a person from this congregation who started doing cleaning of homes as kind of a business, and I don't even know who the person was, but they left tracts about God's plan for their life in the home. And it happened to be the home of Herm Link, who was the assistant manager of Sears and Roebuck here in San Jose. He started reading them. He started coming to church. He gave his heart to the Lord. Later, he was chairman of the board of the college in the 60s. But I will never forget one time, Uncle Roy and someone else was counting the money back in my dad's office, and the person said, "Look at that, there's a $100 bill." And Uncle Roy, I can hear him, he says, "That's not a $100 bill, that's a $1,000 bill." And most of us thought it was probably Herm Link that gave that gift. So though the resources were small, because of the faithfulness of those who made up the church, God provided to bring us to where we are today, and we ain't done yet. God is just so good. There's been a dedication ringing throughout this congregation for years, and now hundreds of thousands of dollars have been given to missions and beyond. Well, the DNA is dedication. Second is navigation. How did Central navigate to where it is today? The theme text that was read talks about running in the race. How did those early runners run in this race? How did they navigate through the wilderness to get us to a piece of the promised land? How was it done? It's been priceless. Dad laid aside the security of preaching in a growing congregation down in Visalia, California, to move the family up here to San Jose when I was 3.5 years old and Belt was in his 50s. But, you started it, man. Besides that, he used to always call me Pee-wee. I resented that through the years, but anyway. Where was I? I'm getting too much of Don Hinkle into me here. Let's see. He laid it all aside. In fact, the church in Visalia, when Dad came here, he had no way to start a church except just open the door and get it going. So they paid him $75 a month for the first 6 months that he was the pastor of Central Christian Church, called the Church of Christ at that time. But he began to run a race that has got us to where we are today. There are some slides that I want to show you, a little bit of the journey that we've been on. The first slide there, I guess we already saw that, of the small children, did we? There we are. That's Visalia, California, and that's just before we left to come here. And then Dad was preaching for this church there in Visalia, a very secure situation. But some buildings had been purchased at 306 South 5th Street here in San Jose by a man by the name of Brother Sanderson. And Brother Sanderson was a very fine Christian man who started other Christian colleges, but he was in his 80s. He purchased them in the early 1930s. He was not in good health, and so he contacted Dad and asked if he would be willing to come up and start a Bible college. And Dad realized that he had no way to fund it because it was an independent, and so he would have to start a church in order to have a way for resources to be available to start a Bible college. And so that's what gave birth then to the church in January. The next slide shows the little ticket that was handed out around the neighborhood. It talks there about the meeting starting in January 3rd and going on for a couple of weeks, and later the church had its official launch. But the next slide shows Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Roy, who joined him then in the summer of 1939. This next slide, I think we got the wrong slides in here. There we go. And Ruth Bond was also there, who taught music at the beginning of the college. But Dad and Uncle Roy shared the preaching. And then the first youth group was this one right here. And that's my cousin Vivian. Vivian, where are you? There you are, right back there. She's that pretty lady back in the back. She was a pretty lady then. And that was Uncle Roy and Aunt Dorothy's daughter. And then Velt there, and myself. And then I don't know who that other girl was. I don't recognize her. I'm sure Velt dated her along the line. But it's the afternoon. You only have to be holy on Sunday morning, right? I mean, really, you The Bible College was launched in September 19th, and Dad thought he had enough money to get this thing going. And here's a copy of Dad's sermon, of all things. I still have it. It's in the book also, where he talks about the values upon which that college is going to be built, Christ-centered and biblically based, and a passion for the world and so forth. And there were about 14 students that showed up that first year for the student body. And you would know some of them. We won't take time to name them because they'd take us too long. But by the late 1940s, there was a good-sized student body, of course, at the college, as Dad was preaching at the church and doing the college work too. And on the pavement, you can see it on the right-hand corner, was the plan of salvation in the walkway as it went up toward the building. Do you remember that, Jess? I don't even remember that. But it said faith, hear, believe, repent, confess, be baptized, live godly. And it was each of the stairs. You remember that, Wayne, do you, there at the, yeah, I see Wayne Bigelow over here. He was a student back in 1920, was it, Wayne? You were there, something like that. He was there in the 40s. In fact, he might even be in that picture. Are you in that one that we're looking at the top? Can't you see yourself? Okay. I think he may be. But the school grew, and San Jose State wanted our property. So they condemned it, and we found another place, 12th and Virginia Street, and we moved there. And it became both the Church of Christ, and San Jose Bible College. And we had a youth group in the 50s that I belonged to. It's a little blurry there. But Ron Hansen and John Herbert and all the girls that Ron dated during those days are here in this picture. And Benny and Hope Ingraham were our youth sponsors. Man, they did a fabulous job. So sacrificial in the way they related to us and loving, and it was really a neat part of our journey. Looking from the platform of the stage out into the auditorium where we all sat, this is what the morning worship service would look like. And in 1957, Harold Gallagher became the preacher of Church of Christ, now Central Christian Church. And I had the privilege in 1957 and early 58 to be the first youth minister of Central Christian Church. And Harold was my boss, and I did youth ministry there, and then moved to Milwaukee, Oregon in youth ministry. Then we moved over to Meridian property in 1963. Roy Rickard was the preacher, and then John Stone. And then I started weekend preaching in 1973. I was dean of students at San Jose Bible College. And Benny asked me if I'd come over and preach a few times. Well, I kind of enjoyed it, and it seemed to go pretty well. As it grew, we decided to become full-time. But they had a nice little welcoming service for us. Jim Yost is there also, as you can see. He was youth pastor at that time before Don came. And we just had a really wonderfully warm reception. The next picture is of Woody and my wife and I just can't believe that I actually wore an outfit like that one. But those were different days during that time. And I had a belt, and I appreciated the chance to express it. We went on a lot of different kinds of activities. I was kind of an outdoorsy guy. Harold Nepper in the next picture can be seen here on a backpack trip, along with, what's the fellow's name, Stranigan? Gary Stranigan and Jim and myself. And the next picture, Sunday afternoons, if my sermon wasn't too long, we went out and played softball. And we had a lot of fun there together. Let's see, are there any softball players here today that were on that team? Raise your hand. Stand up. Let's see who you are. You used to be in good shape. Any softball player? Yeah, Jim Segre. I knew he was on the team. The only one left. Okay, all right. All right. As I mentioned, we had a number of faculty who always attended here, and that made it especially interesting. One of them was Reuben Ratzliff that we loved. And Reuben was just a fun guy. In fact, his son is here today at the service. Our family had a celebration for my mom and dad's 50th anniversary here at Central Christian Church. We went into a building program in the early 1980s. In fact, the center beam there can be seen starting to be lifted up there. Is there another one of that also? The next slide. Anyway, we had weddings also. at this church. And I think I recognize it was Dave and Lori Commons, is that right? And Brent and Candy Jacobs, and they're here. I wish I could picture all of them. I see the others that are here. But we just had a lot of ones. Go to the next slide. We have here's just a few of the pictures that I had. I'll never forget Don Deathridge up in the upper left-hand corner. He was an older fellow, and he played baseball against Babe Ruth. I don't know if any of you remember or not. Back in the early 70s, quite a guy. He had an artificial leg, and he came to the Lord, wanted to be baptized. We were over in the old building, so got him in the baptistry, and they took off his leg and threw it out over the edge. It bounced on the platform. So I baptized Don, and he came. I said, I want to say something. I said, okay. He said, many times I have received the glory of man, but today I received the glory of God. I love that, coming from his own background. Well, there are many weddings there. Let's see, I think, Scott, is that you? Yeah. Okay, and that's Pat and Linda Gelsinger. And how many of you were married here? He said, stand up, let's see who you are. Yes, there's, oh, look at that. Wow, man. Way to go. Ooh, I could say a lot, but I won't. And then I was preaching along. Oh, yes, that's a good picture there I meant to call attention to. This is a young man that started working at San Jose Bible College for us in the early 1980s, about 86. And he was my right-hand man. He was the executive VP or something like that. And anything I didn't want to do, I gave to Roger to do. And he was really good at it. He was the one that did all negotiating with our lawyers and developers, trying to relocate 12 different sites and so forth. Most all of them failed. And I was beginning to wonder if the issue was more than just, well, anyway, I won't go there. But Roger was my right arm. And when the church here needed a pastor, you guys were smart and you jerked him away. And in 2004, when he began here, we even gave a plaque to him to indicate we were going to name a room on campus called the Edrington Room. And we have been so grateful, Roger, for all that you've contributed there. He led us in our search. Amen. He led us in our search to the beautiful new campus, 130 acres of land, lots of room for growth. And just last fall, over 1,100 students showed up for classes. As soon as I got out of there, the place really has taken off, you know. I retired in 75, but I still get to work there. I'm hired back for about 30 hours a week doing development stuff and so forth. But what a blessing it is. In fact, they're standing in front of the Crawford's Commons there that John and Norma helped us with. And we have just been so blessed by the way things have come together and rolled forward. And last month, as was shared, we celebrated one of our first 75th anniversary celebrations. We had a panel, and Velt is here sharing some of his exciting stories. And then we just had a time of celebration ourselves. And I show that to you, Central, because what you just saw exists because you're here in San Jose, California. Had it not been for Central Christian Church, I would have been out of a job. We would have not had the impact that has been made through the years. And as you look back, it is amazing when you think about it. The legacy of just my dad having a vision to have this happen, and then the church being born, and then to see it go forth with such energy and power as it has truly been amazing. Well, the DNA is dedication and navigation. It's also accreditation. Accreditation means that you are functioning under the standards given to you, and you're fulfilling them. In education, we have to do that. with WASC, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, appointed by the state of California to supervise education, to make sure that people are getting what they're paying for and all that kind of stuff. But in the church, to become accredited by God, you follow his accreditation standards that he has set. And I believe with all of my heart, you guys have been faithful and loyal to those accreditation standards, and you are accredited by God. You're accredited by him as I see what has happened, your commitment to its mission to transform the nations of the world into the family of God from Dad forward, to go forth into all the world, baptizing and bringing people to Christ and preaching the gospel, to utilize and practice the foundational resource, which is prayer. And I can remember at the very beginning, my dad had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to that little office at 306 South 5th Street and start praying, because he had to pray the resources in. Belt and I had to be in bed by 9 o'clock the night before because Dad had to get up early. Little did he know that after 30 minutes and he was asleep, we would get back up. But Dad was faithful in that, and you have been too, to pray and to utilize the power and the resources available through prayer, to demonstrate the life-changing power of Christ. Christ in you, the hope of glory. Future accreditation will continue to live by the biblical standards as we absorb them into our journey. Well, it's to run flat out, folks, to run flat out the race that is marked out for us. And I want you to listen to the video of Dad saying that, because Hebrews chapter 13 or 12 was one of his favorite verses. You know, we have read it, seeing that we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside the weight, the sin that does so easily beset us. Let us run with patience or endurance the race marked out for us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him suffered the cross, so that we could experience life today and forevermore. Listen as he says that just about 3 years before he went on to glory in this little 40-second video clip.
And I'm thankful tonight that we can be here to share with you what I believe is that which is so necessary and so important, is to look to Jesus. We're all in this marathon. We're all running this race, and we must be faithful. We cannot grow weary, as that third verse tells us, but we must carry on until we hear that, well done, thou good and faithful servant, enter thou into the joy prepared for you. God bless each one of us as we run together. We're all runners, and may he help us that we might be faithful unto death, that we might receive the crown of life that fades not away. Thank you.
Amen. Well, I can hear him saying it yet, too, if we played more of that tape. Son, there ain't no retirement in God's kingdom. You can't find it anywhere. From the book of Genesis through the book of Revelation, you keep running, you pick up those legs hard, and you push them down until you break that tape and hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And I say to him, Dad, I'm trying, man. I'm trying. And I have an idea. The Dad may be among us today. I don't know how all this works. I'll find out someday. But I have an idea that Dad's probably looking down over the edge of heaven about right now and giving one of his deeper theological insights to everything that has occurred. And it would be this, which I heard many times. My. Look what God has done. And that would be his response. To see the faithfulness of the people of God here at Central Christian Church, and to see the impact that is being made upon the world. May all who come behind us find us faithful. Well, we all have thoughts of gratitude and memories of our lives. I stand before you with my joy cup full and gratitude cup full. Just a joy to share with you. And my own journey was, I realized that it was here that I gave my heart to Christ when I was 8 years old. remember asking Dad, I said, Dad, I want to become a Christian like everybody else. And I remember Velt's really sympathetic understanding of that was simply, oh, he just wants to take communion. I hadn't planned on saying all these things, Jess, but you got to start it, okay? I'll never forget when I was baptized, because the church at 306 South 5th Street, Wayne, you may remember this, the baptistry was under the floor, and they tilted the floor up and put a 2x4 under to hold it there. And I remember as a little kid coming along and saying, whoa, God, please keep that 2x4 in place. I want death and burial, but I want resurrection too. And I remember Uncle Roy. He knew me well because he lived right across the street from us with Vivian and Aunt Dorothy. And he had been to the Holy Land, or somehow had gotten a hold of a vial of water from the Jordan River. And he knew I needed all the help I could get. So he took that vial of water from the Jordan River and poured it into my baptistry water. So I want you to know that my baptistry is a cut above most, But it was here, folks, that I got my start, and I was loved and nurtured by so many of you. Just so many memories. It was here that I preached my first sermon when I was just 12 years old. I remember it was a youth rally, and why I got asked, I'll never know. But I remember standing up there at that old building, and my dad was in the back against the door to his office, and those were very conservative years during those times. And so what I was preaching, part of my sermon was, now don't smoke. God's not happy with you if you smoke, because it only takes 3 cigarettes to kill 1 cat. And the nicotine in there will get you. And I remember some of the people were very skeptical and looking at me. And so I said, well, if you don't believe me, you ask my dad, because he told me to say it. And he fell over into his office after I said that. But that was my first preaching, and the quality hasn't improved a whole lot since. But it was there that I graduated from San Jose Bible College and served as the youth guy. It was here that I was ordained for ministry in 1958. It was here that you gave my wife and I the marvelous privilege of serving as your lead pastors for about 12 years. And that just did so much to our hearts. It was here that our 3 children were nurtured and loved and shown how to live a life of integrity, so that none of them flew the coop but have continued to go forth serving the Lord. It was here that you gave over $1 million, as has been mentioned, to build a premier university. And it was here that you touched thousands of lives with God's love, and people have been transformed. And it was here, whether you realize it or not, that in cooperation with the college, the documents that I have studied indicate that out of Central Christian Church and San Jose Bible College, partnering together, over 40 churches in the decade of the 40s were established. That is absolutely phenomenal. It was out of that NCEA eventually was born in the early 50s, because the college couldn't continue to spend that much time in the church planting. They had to do the education component of it, but it was in cooperation with Central Christian Church. And then think of what we saw in terms of church planting from the missionaries that we have heard from Jeff's statements about what's happening in Iraq and Africa and all over the place. It was here that you have sent forth scores of missionaries who lifted up Christ globally. What a DNA, Central Christian Church. Thank you for your dedication, for your navigation, for your accreditation. Thanks for the thousands of lives that you have touched with God's love. Thank you for picking up the basin and towel and serving our Lord with excellence. Thank you for changing the very landscape of eternity. Central Christian Church, congratulations on what you have done. And one of these days, you're going to be celebrating your 100th, as Jim has mentioned. I'm looking forward to being here. I'll only be 104. Jim will probably be with Grandpa. looking over the edge of heaven. And there will be a section, Central Christian Church. And there will be literally millions of people whose lives have been changed forever because of this one congregation and the ripple effect on through the years beyond it. Just when we think of Scott here starting a church and all the things that have happened as a result of the faithfulness of this congregation, I look forward to joining Dad someday and also saying, my, look what God has done. Because it is truly amazing. And as Don Hinkle said this morning, folks, it's not over. The best is yet to come. And it is going to occur, and I'm going to be watching it someday as it continues to take place. Be faithful so that all that come behind you will understand the God that you serve and be committed to the Christ that you love. Central, I love you guys. Thank you for the privilege of sharing in this service.